Hi guys, I'm Mike and this is F1 Fanatics. Welcome back to another Driver Rivalries where we ask who's better, and if you've seen by the thumbnail, our two challengers today are Lando Norris versus Alexander Albon. Obviously both having their rookie seasons last year in Formula 1 and both being in kind of quite well established teams within the sport as well. Lando obviously spending the whole season at McLaren, being the rookie teammate to Carlos Sainz, and Alexander Albon coming into Toro Rosso where he partnered Daniel Kvyat for half a season before being promoted up into the main team, which is Red Bull, and he partnered Max Verstappen for the second half of the season. But as they obviously have spent the same amount of time in F1, two young talents, I did want to include George Russell in this, but it's kind of hard with his first season being in Williams and how uncompetitive that car was to kind of really get a realistic gauge against kind of them as well in F1, shall we say. We're going to go for a two-way head-to-head with Lando Norris versus Alexander Albon with our usual look at the stats, then we'll look at their junior careers, then we will compare some other skills before I make my conclusion and say who I think is better, Alexander Albon or Lando Norris. But guys, let's start off with those stats, and we're going to start off with Lando Norris. And Lando Norris has competed in 21 races, obviously having a 21 race calendar last year. He scored 49 points in his rookie season. His best qualifying was 5th, which he did twice. His best race finish was 6th, was actually unlucky because his best race finish would have been 5th at the Belgian Grand Prix before that retirement, and his World Driver Championship position after his first year was 11th. Now we look at Alexander Albon. Of course, obviously competed in the same amount of races, 21. He scored 92 points over the course of the season, probably expected to be higher there with that half a season in the Red Bull car. His best qualifying was 5th as well, where he secured this 3 times. His best race finish was 4th, and his World Driver Championship position was 8th. Now looking at those stats, obviously the points are going to have a bit of disparity in terms of the quality of where Red Bull were in comparison to McLaren last year, but in the other areas they are obviously pretty close in terms of their qualifying and race positions, and Alexander Albon finishing higher up in the championship. But now we are going to take a look back at their junior career, and we're going to start off actually on this one with Alexander Albon. Now Alexander Albon obviously competed in a lot more than just 3 championships coming up through the junior ranks, but these were the 3 most of note. So he has the Euro Cup Formula Renault, and he finished 3rd in that championship behind Nick de Vries, who won the championship that year, and I believe Olsen finished 2nd. So probably a little bit disappointing for Alexander Albon that he wasn't able to win that championship. Moving on to GP3, and that one he finished 2nd in, and he finished 2nd, you know, he finished above Nick de Vries this time and against some other talented drivers, and only finished behind a certain young Charles Leclerc. So I think there is no disgrace probably looking how Charles Leclerc has developed into the driver he has in losing that championship to him. And then of course F2 is the championship that they both competed in. I think it was the first time they competed in a championship together, other than maybe karting days. Alexander Albon finished in 3rd position behind Lando himself, who finished 2nd, and George Russell, who finished 1st in that championship. We now look at Lando Norris's junior career. Now the first thing you're going to look at from that list from Lando Norris compared to Alexander Albon is there is a lot more of note. He has certainly won a lot more junior championships than what Alexander Albon, well actually Alexander Albon never won a junior championship coming up through the ranks. But yes, the first one on that list for Lando Norris is the MSA Formula Championship, now known as British F4. He came first ahead of drivers like Ricky Collard, Dan Ticktum and he also finished ahead of Colton Herta, who I believe was a talented young rookie in IndyCar, and yeah, I think he's one of the bright and rising stars in IndyCar there. So certainly is a grid that had plenty of talent, and he finished on top of that. We then go to 2016, and obviously he won 3 championships in this year. He won the Euro Cup Formula Renault. First he won the Euro Cup, no, he won the Formula Renault NEC, and he won the Toyota Racing Series. And most of these drivers had, who a lot of people are excited about in the feeder series this year, drivers like Jan de Rouvler, Robert Schwartzman, Marcus Armstrong. A lot of these guys were competing within those series, and Lando finished ahead of those, probably why he has gone on to get to Formula 1 quicker than any of those have, if they do indeed progress to Formula 1. And in 2017 he won the FIA F3 European Championship. Again, a pretty talented grid to come out on top of there. And in the Macau GP he finished second to a certain Dan Ticktum, who will be making his full debut in F2 this season as well. And then, like I said with Alexander Albon, in F2, where George Russell, Lando Norris and Alexander Albon all competed, Lando Norris finished second ahead of Alexander Albon, but behind the ART driver of George Russell, who finished first. Now, looking at their junior careers, for me, clearly there's a standout winner. Yes, budget I think comes into this. I think Lando Norris has a much higher budget than what Alexander Albon could afford, so I think he could compete in a lot more series, get a lot more experience, but you still have to go out and win. Probably had, you know, a lot more money he could pump into the teams to help boost results, but he still had to go out and deliver. And Lando Norris, having 4 championships under his belt, sorry, no, I think it was 5 championships under his belt there in his junior career, compared to Alexander Albon's none. Yeah, you know, it's a pretty obvious one on that one. So Lando Norris wins the junior career head-to-head. Now we look at teammate head-to-head, and both went out up against some quite challenging drivers in their rookie year. And Lando Norris, he came up against Carlos Sainz, who was, you know, Martin Brundle felt he was a little bit underrated, and last year he certainly showed the potential that Carlos Sainz has, who had a very strong, consistent season. But Lando Norris was able to beat him in qualifying 11-10. He did actually lose out in the race to where they both completed races, 9-4, but it was still pretty impressive to beat Carlos on the qualifying front, showing Lando's natural pace. Alexander Albon, of course, had 2 individual teammates in this head-to-head one. First was against Daniel Kvyat, and the second one was, of course, Max Verstappen, but he lost the head-to-head in both qualifying and race against Kvyat and Max Verstappen. Obviously, Max Verstappen a much tougher opponent than both Kvyat and Carlos Sainz was for Lando Norris there. But I think in teammate head-to-heads, the impressiveness of Lando Norris beating Carlos Sainz in qualifying means that he actually wins the head-to-head on the head-to-head front. We now go and look at their respective qualifyings, and for me, Lando Norris is the quicker driver out of the 2, showing that against, we just mentioned it there, Carlos Sainz. He beat him in qualifying, and I just think, you know, Lando's natural pace, he can put in a very good quick lap. I remember even from his first Grand Prix in Australia, he had a very impressive making it into Q3 for the first time there. And I think he out-qualified Carlos Sainz on that day as well. So that was mightily impressive from Lando Norris. Alexander Albon still quick, still consistent, but you know, going back to the stats, their best qualifying position is both 5th. And considering that Alexander Albon was in a Red Bull for half a season, you certainly would have expected him to be better than what Lando Norris got with his 5th position as well, and showed the kind of stand up there. Now we look at their race, and I'm actually going to give this one to Alexander Albon. I believe this is an area where Lando Norris struggled during the year. I think his racecraft wasn't quite up to the standard of, in comparison, of Alexander Albon. It improved throughout the year, and the second half of the year was certainly a lot better, and he certainly had some pretty impressive overtakes. Going back to kind of thinking Kota for me was a pretty impressive one for Lando Norris. I think he overtook Vettel on the outside when Vettel obviously had that damage to his car, springs to mind, and was impressive there. But Alexander Albon, he was kind of aggressive, he was bold in his overtakes, and he usually made them stick. Yes, sometimes they didn't quite work, although he got away with one, actually, funnily enough, against Lando Norris in Suzuka. But overall, I remember his first race at Spa in Belgium, and just the overtakes he was pulling up, because obviously he started back with the engine part replacements that were there. He was really impressive, and I have been really impressed by Alexander Albon's racecraft and what he kind of puts in there, certainly against drivers in the midfield. It was pretty impressive. So for this one, I am going to give it to Alexander Albon. Yes, he does have the better race finish, was in the better machinery, but I just think as it currently stands, Alexander Albon is probably slightly ahead of Lando Norris still in terms of that racecraft. The last point we're going to compare them against is consistency, and again this one is going to go to Alexander Albon. And Lando was inconsistent in races. Sometimes it was unlucky, not his fault, but both him and Carlos Sainz both had 4 retirements across the course of the year. He just obviously struggled at times learning the car, and I just think Alexander Albon in the Toro Rosso, in the Red Bull, you just kind of know what you were getting. He hasn't quite reached that upper echelon level where he can really challenge the top guys yet, but he certainly is a consistent driver, bangs out the laps. You know what you're going to get from him on a race, and the qualifying, although not maybe as stand out as Lando Norris's qualifying, he is very consistent in terms of getting the car where it at least should be, which is what obviously Pierre Gasly in the first half of the season wasn't doing for Red Bull. In conclusion then, and this is a tough one because I am quite tight, and obviously we can't exactly compare them in F1 because they haven't entirely been in the same machinery, so it has been difficult, obviously Albon being in that Red Bull. For me, Alexander Albon, he was solid. I think people have probably bigged up his performances a little bit more than they maybe should have had, because if he had done what he did all year, I think Gasly, how bad Gasly was in that first half of the year with Red Bull, kind of makes Alexander Albon's second half of the season look better than it actually was. It was solid, it was consistent, but you know, he really does need to step up on this. Where Lando Norris for me had a better, I know Alexander Albon won the Rookie of the Year official awards, but for me, Lando Norris, we've discussed on this channel before, was the Rookie of the Year, and I think that mightily impressive, beating his teammate in qualifying, showing that natural race pace. I think Lando Norris actually showed greater improvement through the season as a driver as well, having those kind of junior titles behind him as well, showing that he knows how to win races. Alexander Albon obviously would have won races in his time in his junior career, but winning championships, winning races, I just think at this current stage, with all these things, we don't know how they might go, especially the young drivers when we compare them. But I think at this stage, Lando Norris for me is my winner, and I think he's the better driver out of Alexander Albon at this stage of their careers. But there you go guys, that is my thought on our driver rivalries of F1, who's better, and this one has been won by Lando Norris. It'd be great to hear your thoughts in the comments down below guys. As always, do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Let me know your thoughts. Is there any points that you would kind of rate them higher on within each other? We always love kind of getting involved with you guys in the comments below, and it would be great to hear your thoughts on this driver rivalry. If you've liked this video, don't forget you can give it a thumbs up. Lets us know that you're enjoying our content, and yeah, gives us feedback on there. And also, if you are new around here or you haven't done so already, please make sure you hit that subscribe button and, you know, click that bell notification, and you can keep up to date with all our latest content just like this one. Also, a shout out, yesterday came out. Yesterday we did a collaboration with the F1 debate show where me, Ash, Jordan and Lyle discussed, or well, we rated the 10 liveries of the F1 teams for 2020, and we gave them a rating out of 10. So make sure you check out that video. Really good video. It was great to be a part of. And yeah, see if you agree with our thoughts on that one as well. But for now, you F1 fans, keep racing.